Welcome to the Mundus Fractura Law Guide. This week on Law Guide, we will take a look at the topic of teleportation. Along with flight, teleportation is one of the most sought-after abilities by practitioners of the powers. Both magic users and psionic devotees alike have the power to access teleportation, the incredible phenomena of instantly appearing where you would like to be with little or no effort. Though most on Mundus may think they understand the basic fundamentals of how teleportation works, most are wrong. The first incorrect supposition on how the process works is typically some variation on the theme, involving the bending of space-time. This is where a portal is created that bends space and time so that they share the same point. The second most popular incorrect hypothesis revolves around the quote-unquote beaming of matter. This would be where matter gets transposed to energy and reconfigured at a destination point. In either case, you are in one spot and then instantly in another spot. On Mundus, the reality of teleportation is very different. Before I continue, in the name of good science, I feel it is only right to cite my sources. Though my usual research resources, which are typically an excellent starting point, those of the great archives of Mundus, especially for this topic, the Elven, Tortum, and Mycelium archives, each of which having an impressive store of knowledge and a deep focus on the psionic tide and magic weave. On the topic of teleportation, all fell short of revealing the truth. But I am resourceful. Deep in the hidden tomb of the respected hydromancer known as Penarole, there sits a moist grimoire. Within its pages are a lifetime of measured scientific research on the topic. The true meat of the hydromancer's studies begins in experiment number 301, dated 10 and 76 of the common time, midsummer, month 5, week 2, day 7. Penarole writes, "I intend to this time send 4 subjects to my tower in the city of Deep Isla. Subject 1, female Goliath, early in her 20th decade. She is a novice scion of limited abilities who seems to have a focus on psychometabolism. Subject 2, male gnome of indeterminate age. This subject seems to be augmented with green residuum in some manner that is, as of yet, unclear to me. Unrelated further study is required. Subject 3, female Felidae of indeterminate age with a minor aptitude for the arcane arts. Subject has issues with memory and is often seen in deport, thinking she is one of several personalities. Subject 4, male Drekar, presumably in his mid-30th to mid-40th decade. Subject is a divine caster and has a strong permanent connection to the ethereal plane." The hydromancer then continues, "These subjects do not have knowledge of my experiments. I will be sending them through a portal to my tower. On arrival, they will be tasked with turning on a light switch. The switch will illuminate the room and trigger the return portal. The subjects will be sent with a few mundane items, including a compass, a feather, a piece of grey residuum, a thermometer, and a watch. I will examine each on their return." Penarole then goes through an exceedingly boring review of the reasoning behind the selection of each of the objects, but I will spare you as it is ultimately irrelevant. Skipping ahead a bit to his experiment summation, he writes, "Subjects successfully returned. Results of the experiment are on the surface, discouraging and markedly mundane. As with the preceding 300 experimental attempts, subjects have gone through the portal to the end location, completed their task, activated the return portal, and returned. As with all preceding experiments, these subjects noted instantaneous arrival and return trip durations. Their collective experience, as noted as by many previous subjects, was comparable to that of walking through a doorway into a new room. However, Subject 1, the female Goliath, later presented me with an alarming find. Subject 1 is what some would call a regular or obsessive journaler. keeping independent regular logs of a great many of her perceived experiences. Subject 1's journals point to the existence of what I will refer to as the Teleportation Interstitial Plane, or T.I.P. Her journal claims that the T.I.P. is a shadowy grey realm where, much like the ethereal plane, subjects can see a version of the prime material plane. Her journal further claims the subjects had to walk to my tower across the lake, and that they even made camp for a night or two. There is further note that the subjects encountered some type of bearded humanoid inhabitant of this realm, though the details provided on this individual are unhelpful at best. Fascinatingly, the subject's return trip did not contain journal entries, and it is unclear why the two trips differed. None of the subjects could confirm the validity of any of these journal entries, but with this tip about the T.I.P., I have a possible path forward in my future experiments. Subject 1's journal entries would prove to be accurate. The teleportation interstitial plane did exist, and Penarole would go on to complete a great many other experiments in the T.I.P. Though his writings on the subject are incredibly illuminating and informative, they are also highly technical, dry, and intensely boring. As well, they are also at times grossly inappropriate for our purposes. So allow me to summarize his findings. Teleportation, both magical and psionic, function via the same mechanism. Penarole dubbed it the 3 T's of teleportation in honor of the assistance provided by Subject 1 and their eventual friendship. Those 3 T's being threshold, travel, and termination. Threshold, Penarole defines this as the magical or psionic means of commencement. The threshold is the effect that both sends the user to the teleportation interstitial plane and sets up the guided route. Threshold commencement effects vary from source to source, but are typically either some type of portal a subject must pass through, or a visual effect preceding a subject's perceived disappearance, a puff of smoke or shimmer of light, for example. Travel. This is the true core of Penarole's treatise. Though the hydromancer was unable to fully understand the, shall we say, placement of where the teleportation interstitial plane sits in reality. Through the power of journaling, he was able to define a great many of the properties and realities of the realm. Finally, termination, which is the subject's return to normal space. Again, the effects vary from source to source, but are typically either some type of portal a subject must pass through, or a visual effect preceding a subject's reappearance. Penarole was able to clearly document the following facts. Firstly, he found that time is rather, and I quote, wibbly-wobbly. T.I.P. time doesn't correlate to either time in the prime material nor time in the ethereal planes. In relation to the prime material plane or real world, travel through the T.I.P. is seemingly instantaneous. An individual could spend days in the T.I.P., but no time will pass in the real world. Though individuals do experience a normal passage of time in the T.I.P., devices that record time do not function. Penarole found that travelers do age, but at a reduced rate. He further noted that though T.I.P. travelers will experience fatigue and will require sleep, they do not require sustenance in any form. Frequent travelers, users of teleportation powers, are by the end of their natural lives older than if they had never used these powers. He further postulated that it was conceivable that a person could exit a termination point noticeably older than when they entered the threshold. On this point, he further noted that both aging and several other perils increase with the distance traveled. I will expand on these perils in more detail momentarily. He thoroughly explored the time dilation with both magic and psionics. There is a power commonly known as BAMF among psions, which involves several quick short-distance teleportation bursts. These trips, explored by Penarole with the aid of an associate, were found to use the exact same T.I.P. mechanics as his own arcane magics. Further, it was found that two individuals could enter the tip simultaneously via separate powers, interact with each other while in the tip, then leave the tip at separate times, even days apart, and emerge at precisely the same moment in the real world. In every case, subjects had no memory of their time or actions while in the teleportation interstitial plane. Thank goodness for journals. Secondly, to the point of physical interactions while in the TIP, physical contact between multiple travelers seemed to function normally. As well, both magic and psionic powers seemed to function as per mundus norms. Tip travelers could suffer physical damage and death in the tip. Side note, rest in peace, Squeaky the Chipmunk. And the effect of spirit also functions normally. Deceased creatures were found to appear at either the entry or end points immediately on death, while the spirit of sentient individuals became so with no knowledge of how they died, consistently attributing their death to a spell or psionic mishap. Thirdly, to the point of physical travel. The teleportation interstitial plane was found to instinctually compel non-sentient creatures to travel as quickly as possible towards the point of exit, where by opposition, sentient creatures would feel the compulsion and could see a clearly marked shining path or sprite luring them to the teleport's exit point, but could resist. Unattended teleported objects were all universally carried along at blinding, unrecordable speeds from entry to exit, always avoiding obstruction and all attempts to impede. It was found that with living creatures, should they move faster than their normal day-to-day leisurely pace, that both their speed and cognition improved exponentially. The faster a subject attempted to run, the exponentially faster they could move. The final group of observations from the mage come in the form of dire warnings about straying from the defined path of travel. Penarol noted that though a path might seem perilous, the provided path through the TIP is always correct. He states, and I quote, "Ignore your want to roam or explore. Stamp out with extreme prejudice that little voice that tells you to stray from the path and see what's over that hill off in the distance. My dearest friends, I tell you that yonder there sits only peril, faceless horrors beyond your imagining and suffering no one should ever know. If my journals are to be believed, it is a miracle that I am here to write this warning. A supreme fortune that my body was somehow able to complete my journey, as it seems that my mind should have not. And finally, a mercy of the weave that I cannot recall the true nature of the eldritch rantings of these final, near ill-fated travel journals. Stay to the paths and be safe, my valued friends." That is all for this time. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Stay tuned for future Lore Guide shorts, and thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.